Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're watching on YouTube, you can find out more about how to make this all work at officehours.global. We're going to start. The first hour is general questions, any questions that you might have around media or virtual production. Second hour is usually something we want to spend a little more time on. Today, we're trying to figure out what we're going to do with NAB. We're not even sure if it's, we don't know what's going to happen, what form it's going to take, and how we're going to cover it. So we're going to brainstorm a little bit about that. And it's more of a brainstorm, not only about NAB, but just about conferences in general. Like, what is the best way for us to get information to us that way? So we're going to, have that discussion there. Tomorrow we're going to talk about the business of live streaming. This is has been a constant discussion here, but how do you actually do the business of live streaming? So we're going to discuss that a little bit. And then on Friday, we're going to talk a little bit about breaking down what we call the Belfast method. We've been taking over locations. This week, we're not even doing it in Belfast. Todd Reynolds is going to be the next victim of the Belfast method. So we're going to be taking over Todd's little space and doing a live show and seeing what it takes to make that actually work. But we're going to talk about where we're at. We haven't figured it all out yet, but we'll talk about where we're at right now. Saturday is a long day. Education comes up at 8 o'clock. It's if you're an educator, it's a pretty great conversation. Very, really digging into a lot of what's coming up next and how to manage it. And it's really amazing. 10 o'clock, of course, is the Belfast method. We're going to be hanging out with Todd Reynolds and trying to take over his space. At noon, we're going to be cooking with Damayanti Gajar. It's going to be very exciting. It's great every single time. And we're getting a lot of comments back from people who do cook-alongs and other things about how this is completely different than something they've seen before. And even if you're not into the cooking, you should watch it, because as a concept of people learning on Zoom together, it could be applied to many things. So cooking just happens to be what we're applying it to right now. Then at 2 o'clock, we're going to talk about the remotes deep dive. So yesterday we saw a little bit about how the remotes put together the music video and the music, and we're going to go through that piece by piece. So there's going to be a lot to digest at 2 o'clock on Saturday afternoon. All right, let's jump into the questions, Bill.
We start with Rupert McRae in Dallas, Texas, here on the panel, and he says, what was the behavior of Zoom audio during the playout of the remotes video yesterday on office hours?
You want to elaborate, Rupert?
Yeah, so yesterday after office hours, there was some discussion about how well the audio was coming through from the video playout. And then some other testing was done in there back and forth, and still things weren't sounding right. And we were trying to figure out why, not just with that video, but people were playing in other test audio and stuff, and it still wasn't sounding right. So we set up a separate meeting, actually a webinar, to test it in the real world. And we were having the same experience there. So we went through a troubleshooting kind of process. And through one way or another, we found that when you have somebody dialed into the meeting over the PSTN, so they've used one of the 10-digit 1-800 numbers or any of the telephone call numbers, when you have somebody joined in, even as an attendee into a webinar, it drops and squashes the audio quality of the entire event. And so we pretty robustly checked that through a lot of checking. A bunch of us jumped in there, and Jeff joined from the Zoom test kitchen, and that is definitely the behavior that we've observed. We have kind of some initial lines of inquiry into Zoom, and it seems that they kind of acknowledge that as behavior, but we're waiting to get some official news on that. So that's kind of what we found.
That is amazing. Well done. We tested a lot of things related to that, because we had a music-based event in Zoom that we were trying to get to work, and we found that we were testing a bunch of different things, and we were finding that it was just kind of a random. I don't think it's the only thing that it causes it to squash it. I think it's just predictable, because we were still having trouble where everything's working, and then one more person joins, and then it stops working, and we try to figure out what that one person had, and was it a PC, was it a Mac, was it a whatever, and then sometimes it would be working for a while, and then 15 minutes in with no visible changes, it would stop doing stereo. And so that's why I kind of gave up on it, was like, well, we just can't do that right now. I can't do stereo in Zoom. So I do think that the behavior, in my opinion, for Zoom should be, I'm going to give you stereo, and if you only have a mono output or you have a phone or whatever, I'm going to give you the left channel. Like it just and that should be it. Like you just get the left channel, and if they all go to the right, then you don't hear anything. But it should be, if we decide we want if the host decides they want stereo, it should force stereo. And just give you left channel if you're and not try to sum it, not try to, do anything else, because it's just, why put it in there if it doesn't, it's so unpredictable that you question whether you should ever. We just gave up. We just told clients you can't do it. Go ahead, Rupert.
Yeah, and just a sort of subset of that behavior. If somebody overtly dials in through the dial-in number, that gives the behavior that I've described. But a subtlety can be also if they join the meeting through Zoom and choose the join via telephone audio, that'll join them to the meeting one way and route their audio through the PSTN. So that will generate the same behavior. We tested that also. So it's just a thing you've really got to watch out for. Of course, you can disable telephone dial-in completely for any meeting or event, but obviously you have you're excluding some accessibility there.
Yeah, I'm going to have to apologize to 7-4. I'm just going to apologize ahead of time because we're going to start testing this, and part of the testing is that we're going to turn off the phone. So because I'd rather have stereo. So anyway, you go ahead, John.
Rupert and team, it was a wonderful troubleshooting that you did, and the report, and spoke with a person I know at Zoom, and this is a known behavior and part of the audio conferencing bridging. So if you look under Zoom and look under audio conference options, it talks about how the various 800 numbers can be set up in various countries. And so it's a complex issue. And what Alex talks about, a way to prevent that is just not allow people to use the telephone circuits. But you pointed out the one use case is somebody who logs in but then decides to connect via phone. So I think it will be discussed. But the reason it's so erratic in behavior is that if you can imagine hooking up telephone services across multiple countries, and they do operate slightly differently for phone bridges, so it's a non-trivial problem.
What I would say is that I would just pass left channel to the conferencing, just not sum it, or just say that's what we're we're going to go down that path. If someone sets up stereo, like if they set up stereo in the back end, then it means that they want to have, it should be pretty clear for this meeting we want stereo, and if we say we want stereo, it should prioritize, in my opinion. It should prioritize stereo over like it should say, I'm going to do something that's good enough for the phones, but what I'm going to focus on. And that should be like a very overt, like I'm hitting the stereo button, because if I hit the stereo button, it means I have music that I would like to, be part of this thing. There's no other reason to do stereo, in my opinion. So it needs to be, I think it should force it. Like it's, force it down, and it should not be a hair trigger to turn it off. It should be, you're going to get a lower quality experience if you don't have stereo. Like it's not, because, and it should warn you. And I think that sometimes we need to give people, we see this in a lot of other places where you try to do something automatic. When you do it automatic, it creates, it makes it impossible to use the product the way it was designed. In this case, not Zoom, but stereo. Anyway, let's see. Next question.
Rick Timkovich in Wellington, Colorado is next and says, upgraded my home office video conference setup with an ATEM Mini Pro thanks to office hours. Now I want to upgrade my audio setup, currently using AirPods Pro mic into ATEM or MacBook Pro. Is there another way?
Go ahead, David.
Would recommend, I just did this following the lead of everyone here on office hours. I went with what is this? The Heil PR40 into a Flow 8, and it's been beautiful, and it goes directly via USB into my MacBook Pro.
Bill, are you on audio, on original audio?
I don't know if I am or not. Let me check real quick.
John Nelson is unmuted.
Oh, it's John. You're passing a lot of white noise. All right, John, go ahead, John. You can open up now, but you might want to turn off, if you have original audio on. Try turning it off, because it's a lot of white noise. Go ahead, John. We'll jump to Jason in a second, and we'll come back to John. Go ahead, Jason.
I don't think I said yes to that one.
You didn't. I jumped ahead. Mickey, go ahead.
So yeah, a lot of us, I think pretty much everyone here on the panel, we're using, I guess you would consider professional grade microphones, either dynamic or condenser, large diaphragm, or I think, is anyone here on headset mics? Doug Ferguson is on a headset mic. Pair that with an audio interface going into your computer, and that would give you way better audio than going through the ATEM Mini, which has preamps that leave a lot to be desired.
Go ahead, John.
No, I think I was not on this one, although I am using a USB microphone, and I've tried a bunch of them, and you can find some less expensive microphones. We've been playing with that with Estate Parts, but the PR40 does sound beautiful.
It's good. I mean, a lot of us use the PR40. The reason that we use it in our offices is because you have a lot of off-axis rejection, so that you have a lot of noise around your office, and it's not going to send it. It's a relatively quiet mic. But you do need to have an audio interface with enough gainability that it can actually, it has to be able to go down to about -70, because I think the PR40 is at about -60. So anything less than that is not going to be able to go down and grab onto the volume, the very low volume coming in. So that's something to think about there. Next question.
Moving on to Jim Abraham in Hesperia, it looks like, says, how do you connect multiple monitors to a Mac Mini M1?
Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, the thing I've been using is this pluggable 4K DisplayPort, and it's about $120 US. What we have found is by adding a couple of them, this is the system that I built, Mac Mini, a couple of them, it gets me a total of 5 outputs from the Mac Mini that allow me to ISO a bunch of people in a Zoom recording. Look what you have. Oh.
I haven't put it in yet, but
you didn't buy them in pairs?
I didn't. I just bought one.
Amateur.
I want to test it. I just wasn't sure if you were on the spot.
I make this up.
I know.
I'd make this up. Actually, I get paid by Plugable to pitch this thing.
Chris, you're just not very technical. That's really the challenge. David.
Yeah, the way to go, I think, is with DisplayLink for me. Actually, I'm looking right now at they have USB monitors that have DisplayLink built in as external monitors, which is nice.
Wow, very interesting. Go ahead, Jason.
The maximum is actually 6 monitors out of a silicon Mac, whether it be an M1 or any combination therein. The trick here is that you need active. We need active active DisplayPort that is supported in Big Sur, and that effectively cuts the Thunderbolt 4 into pieces, and that's your hack. I'll put the video link in Mukana.
Next question.
Moving on to Brian Bender in Charlottesville, Virginia, and Brian Becker, says, looking for recommendations on an external mini input HDMI hardware recorder, currently comparing Atomos Shogun options versus HyperDex versus ATEM Mini ISO. AMP looks like a good option for me. What drawbacks or other products should I be considering?
Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, the first thing that pops into my head with the ATEM Mini ISO is that it records a compressed file. So if you need to do a lot of processing to that image, you'll be a little bit limited compared to a recording that is in ProRes or DNX HD or DNX HR.
Go ahead, Stuart.
Yeah, I think Brian needs to let us know if he's just recording HD or 4K, because the options change with those. But I'm going to give you 3 budget options. The first is a decent phone with some decent software and one of the USB capture cards that can plug in. That's a single input, so obviously you'd need 4 phones. The same thing also works with a Raspberry Pi. And if you have the little USB capture cards, you can open 4 instances of VLC on a PC and record in that. But, as Alex often points out, don't push your PC too far. It will fall over eventually.
Yeah, I think that, the best solution, the one that's going to be the most automatic and just tie into everything, is HyperDeck. And so that's going to, that may not be the cheapest solution. The HyperDeck Minis would probably be plenty for you for ISO records. And they'll record in H.264 or in Apple ProRes. So that's an option. And they have a lot of other pieces there. Now you'll have to figure out they're only SDI. So there's a whole bunch of issues you have to kind of deal with if you're going to go into those. I don't think that they'll take HDMI in. But do they take HDMI in, the minis?
Yeah, the one up cheaper ones do. It's HDMI through.
Is it what is that? What are you showing there?
This is the newer HyperDeck, the half rack unit.
Right. I'm thinking about the older HyperDecks. So the newer HyperDecks will do HDMI. So you could theoretically use those for that process. That's going to be the most stable. You're going to get the best content. You're going to lose the least amount of frames, and you have the most options. But it's the most expensive solution that you can do. And then the least expensive is probably just using the ATEM Mini. I let it ISO out at H.264. Next question.
Moving on to our next one from Brent Cougar in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And Brent says, excuse me, I'm in the wrong mode here. Any recommendations for TSA locks for Pelican? No, I'm sorry. Yeah, for TSA locks for Pelican case. It seems no matter what brand I buy, at least one gets sheared off per trip.
Yeah, go ahead, Doug.
Yeah, so I literally just shipped a Pelican case to Jeff Keithley last week, and I used zip ties. I didn't even use a lock. I just zip tied both of them.
Good. Jason?
Yeah, TSA locks to me are useless. The key has been leaked on the internet, but I do have a couple Pelican cases that actually have embedded locks. They are actually in the latch, and that works really, really well. It's the new air travel line.
Go ahead, Mickey.
I'm a big fan of the TSA locks from Victorinox, but as mentioned by Doug Ferguson, their TSA locks are mostly for optics, and I usually use zip ties. But in terms of what has lasted for me, Victorinox has been good.
We use neon, different color neon zip ties for all of it. It doesn't make any difference anymore. There was an article in the Washington Post where they interviewed a TSA person, and he showed all the keys. Like, he literally opened the keys up and showed them that picture that's leaked to the internet was actually leaked by the Washington Post in an article. And because they're only one dimension and just an outline, and they go in, they're done. Like, there's literally no use in having a TSA lock. So the zip ties are just as secure as the TSA lock. We use the neon ones because TSA will always replace them with clear, so that you can look at your case and you'll always know if they opened it or not. Next question.
Rupert McRae in Dallas, Texas. What difference in latency or quality might there be between the USB webcam output of an ATEM Mini and the HDMI output going into a Camlink-USB? Should the Camlink be a better way to go?
Go ahead, Mickey.
Assuming both the Camlink and the ATEM Mini are set to the same frame rate, you would probably expect 1 to 3 frames of latency there, because there's no gen lock going on between the two devices. In terms of what would give you an advantage, I would assume that the Camlink doesn't have that gamma shift issue that the ATEM Mini has, so that might be something to think about.
We have to start creating some batteries of tests. I think we're going to do this in after hours, where we get some cameras up and we start running through things and trying to get a bunch of gear. Because I think that looking at these in scopes would be super useful. Like what does it do, and then look at focus. There's just a bunch of tests here, so we should start brainstorming in after hours, or maybe even in a second hour, of tests we'd like to do with cameras and interfaces to start defining those. Next question.
Sergey Blondin in Sherbrooke QC says, looking for a good 1080p HDMI monitor, preferably a hardened case that runs around $200 to $300 US.
Go ahead, Alan.
Okay, I'm not entirely sure if this was a small field monitor you're after or not, but I've used this one, and I haven't used the hard case, but if you stick it in that hard case,
which
have a big mounting for
this one. What is the? There's people listening.
So it's the Fieldwell the T7, which is a fairly reasonably priced one.
Yep, Stuart.
Damn it, Ellen, you stole my response.
Hey,
I would also suggest a surge that you separate buying monitor from case, because that way you can literally just go to a hardware store and get a case that you can cut the foam out of.
Go, Rupert.
Yeah, plus one on the field world stuff. I actually got one yesterday from my prompter, and it works great. You still probably want to put it in a protective case, and I agree with Stuart. You can pick those up anywhere. If you wanted larger format for full work, like a 24-inch, I've always found that the Dell 2420H is a good monitor. And again, I'd put that in a case. It has your VESA for mounting. I'd maybe put some kind of mounting arrangement in there, and it has the C13 and all the other kind of bits and pieces you want.
Next question.
Our friend Hasmik Gajar in Cape Town, South Africa, wants to talk ZoomISO. Chris Fenwick gave me a high level on ZoomISO and after hours. He pointed out that ZoomISO does not support audio. May come soon. Is there any point at this stage to implement ZoomISO in production?
Go ahead, Josh.
Yeah, there's lots of usefulness for it. You can get 4 feeds on a single Mac Mini. You've got the automated pinning, compatibility with BitFocus, and you can work around the audio. If you're just looking for a recording of audio, you can do a separate machine that does a recording, record to machine as opposed to the cloud. That'll give you ISO audios. But if you need to have a stream audio, just have a separate machine and feed your audios out from there.
Yeah, you're never going to get the, well, not never, but right now you don't get the isolated audio in a true sense. But if you have a well-mannered panel like we do, that actually knows how to not step on each other, then you actually don't need it. So we're going to use it for Office Hours 2.0, where we push all the panelists out. We're still going to have the merged audio. One of the reasons that you may want to think about using is it lowers the latency, and it does require a lot less computers. So I'm getting 4 people per computer as opposed to 1 person per computer, and I have the 1 person per computer for 16. So, but the having 5 Mac Minis doing 20 people is useful, as far as that goes. It also requests all of the videos from everyone. So when you start to cut back and forth, we notice anyway when we look at the panel that everyone looks a lot better, because Zoom is requesting 1080p from every single person. I don't know if it's the most cost-effective thing on the back end for Zoom for us to do this, but it looks great. Next question.
Tobias Moss in Minneapolis, Minnesota is up next with, are you aware of any bands where the sound engineer is a full member of the live band, as in one person receives all the inputs and then mixes and adds effects with artistic choice?
Go ahead, Jeff.
I think there's quite a few bands that their live engineer is someone they would not tour without, because it's such an important part of the sound. One specific band that comes to mind for me is a British metal band, Tesseract, who their live engineer actually took some of their tracks and completely remixed them for an EP that really was a completely different artistic style. And that's actually where I found them, was on that EP, and kind of dove through the rest of their things. So yeah, I think it's very true.
Good, Mickey.
Yeah, Jeff mentioned a lot of what I was going to say, but you can also think about bands that are just starting up. A lot of them tour with their own equipment, with their own, like they bring their own in-ear monitors into their own mixer, and they do it themselves until they can afford to have their own engineers travel with them.
Alan?
And Mickey and Jeff pretty much both covered it. There was another UK band called Enter Shikari, who I used to tour with, and he isn't a member of the band per se, but he is the touring and studio sound engineer, and he does everything with them. It's very common for them to have a lot of artistic choice.
Yeah. No, Jeffrey?
Yeah, our band does it. I'm actually the sound engineer for our band because I have the mixing board. But yeah, when I used to do small venues and things like that, they would bring sound engineers. And first of all, a sound engineer is a part of the band. So out of that way, but there have been sound engineers that set up their own microphones. They'll add extra sound if like one of the singers is sick, or if anything's happened. I had one sound engineer that actually had a guitar behind the board, and yeah, he came in and he played a few things during different songs. So definitely.
Next question.
Comes to us from Graham Cardwell, again in Belfast, Northern Ireland. He says, can you add a faux Fenwick or a dog like Jason's into your Zoom with a single camera? And do you need to route it through a separate source like OBS or an ATEM?
Go ahead, David.
So I think the question was, or do you need to route it? The answer is you do need to route it, because you're essentially layering images or video feeds on top of one another. And so in a software setting, you would need to use OBS or vMix or Ecamm, and hardware, you could use something like the ATEM Mini, but you can't do it natively in Zoom, I don't believe.
Next question.
Chris Widener in Lafayette, Indiana is next with, I had an odd request from a client call. Seems impossible, but is there any way to display a clickable over the video in Zoom? And yes, they said no QR codes allowed.
Rupert?
over the video, I think would be tricky. There's a few possible workarounds. You could maybe use the chat to pop up a link at the right time. You could maybe send a reminder email right before your event or during with the links or the stuff you needed in it. You could also use, it won't be clickable, but you could maybe set up a tiny URL or a bit.ly link for whatever you needed to direct users to, and then pipe that in over your video. At least that will be less for a user to type in. Or finally, just check out the Zoom apps. This sounds like something some app developer may build in as a third-party service.
Jason?
There are a lot of great reasons why. So barring Zoom apps, there's no great way to do this. If you could go with a private YouTube relay feed, and of course you can present some sort of up on there, and this is going to happen again and again. I once had a client ask me on a call, government work, if I could encrypt barcodes. So yeah, this is going to be one of these things that just happens sometimes.
What someone should write is an app for a Zoom app for Zoom and an extension for Chrome that talk to each other, so that basically you push something into that extent into Zoom, and it automatically changes the web page. That would be super cool. Next question.
Rupert McRae here on the panel from Dallas, Texas is up next. NewTek is holding what it calls, quote, the best live interactive online event this year on September 13th through 17th, entitled Choose Your Own Adventure. The sign-up link points to Zoom meetings. How might an event like this fulfill its ambitions?
Stuart?
Okay, they're not in here doing it 24/7. I think it's a boast that they were probably not going to succeed at.
It's a lot to ask.
Yeah,
right?
I don't. Oh no, it's nasty, but it's true.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
So I've had some interactive Zoom events where you have a page interface, and inside that page interface you basically will go to a link, and then that link would go to a Zoom room. So my guess is that's what's going to happen here. Is you're going to go to a main interface, you're going to see something, you're going to turn around, and then they'll take you to another room and go from there. But yeah, we'll see what happens.
I mean, given that it's NewTek, they might produce the feeds that go into the different Zoom rooms, and maybe that would improve the quality. But we'll wait for the report to see how it goes, and if we have time, we might even go to see it. Next question.
Moving on, we have Craig McFarlane in Boston's up next, and Craig says, having a wide tech background, I've heard certain communities use the term ISO to mean very different things. The electric grid operators use it one way, standards, bodies, specific tech standards, optical discs. What is meant by ISO in this context?
Let's move pretty quickly through this one. Stuart?
Isolated recording. Simple as that. And it doesn't matter whether it's audio or it's video. You've got a recording that is isolated from the main mix.
Bill, real quick.
Yeah, it's the ISO International Standards Organization is another common one, but it's just in totally different contexts.
Rupert?
Yeah, to Bill's point, you'll hear all kinds of ISO standards, ISO 7001, ISO this, ISO that. ISO is all referring to the standards organization, mostly in all those contexts. And then, like Stuart said, ISO just can also mean isolated feed.
Yep. Next question.
Graham Cardwell in Belfast, Northern Ireland's up next with an iPad mini using Sidecar, an HDMI monitor, and an HDMI monitor. Could I effectively get 3 screens off from my MacBook Pro?
Jason?
The answer is absolutely, assuming that you plug the monitor into the MacBook Pro and don't try to do anything goofy like plugging it into the iPad, which, by the way, actually does work as long as you have a Pro.
Go ahead, next question.
Okay, let me switch back here real quick. I was going to try to get in on that, but next question from Johnny Estias is, my current setup is a Mac Mini M1, pluggable HDMI adapters, and ZoomISO. Working great so far, except when a participant shares their screen, I can't get rid of the tab on top that reads blah, blah, blah is sharing their screen. Has anyone been able to remove it?
So the way that we have done this is that we have we're using a Zoom room. So the way to get rid of it is a Zoom room. When they do, and if you have 2 monitors out, so instead of Zoom, you have a Zoom room, and you have 2 monitors going out, and you can define that one of the monitors as the screen share output, and then it will put won't have a lot of the other stuff with Zoom over top of it, and then you can cut it into your show. But I don't think there's any way to do it from the standard Zoom, but Zoom Rooms will output it cleanly so that you can cut it into the show. And we use that all the time. Next question.
Tony Tang in Chicago, Illinois is up next and says, any thoughts or predictions on the Red live stream announcement today at 10 a.m. Pacific? Jared Land from Red teased photos on Instagram suggesting perhaps a new 8K VistaVision camera.
Go ahead, Mickey.
I predict it's going to be a very buggy camera with loud fans and with non-standard proprietary connectors.
Oh, like every Red. I think he's right.
Not that Mickey's bitter. All right. Yeah. So anyway, yeah. All right. We should take a look at it. Maybe in after hours, we'll talk about it a little bit. Next question.
Idris Hagi of Fairfax, Virginia is up next, and he asks, what kind of wireless mics would you recommend for two people who will be Zooming from a noisy room or an echoey room? Budget is $500. Thanks.
Go ahead, David.
I'm a fan of the Rode Go Wireless Go 2. You get two transmitters, one receiver, plugs into the computer, either USB or mini jack.
Go ahead, Jeff.
I'm going to suggest AirPods Pros as a possibility.
Jason.
What's going to matter more is that they have headphones and are isolating what's coming out so that it doesn't go in. Also, mic placement is going to matter a whole lot more. After that, any standard like a Sennheiser is going to be just fine.
You could go for the budget. You could a Rode Go with something that a headset mic. As you get that headset, as you get the microphone closer to the mouth, it means that you can turn everything else down. So the echo, the noise, everything else goes further back. So a Pile or a Paulson plugged into the Rode Go, I think could be a really good option. But as you take the Rode Go with its own mic and get it further away from you, you're picking up more of the background. Next question.
Kyle Hammond in Chicago is up next. He says, my after hours invite was through August 31st. It still works as of this morning, but I'm wondering how to extend it in my calendar. Do I need to re-sign up each month?
That's my fault. So I didn't want to annoy everybody with, I fixed it yesterday and I thought, I'm just not going to send everybody an email. Because it says, do you want to notify everybody? And I forgot, as soon as I hit the button, I was like, oh no, it's not going to do any calendar events. It's the same link every day. So it never changes. So you can keep on using that link. I apologize though, because I've now screwed up everybody's, you have to do a calendar invite. If you just had a calendar invite and you get for yourself and you put the link into it and say to repeat it for a month, you'll now have the link yourself, but it's not going to generate from us. It's not going to change. And it's my fault. It's all my fault. Moo, 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 moo. All right, go ahead, Alan.
And that is exactly what I did. I sent it to myself and I set it on for as long as I don't change it in the next 6 months, I'm good.
Yeah, no, we're not changing it. I think I can't ever promise anything, but that was totally operator error on that one. Next question.
Jonathan Swan up next from Upper Marlboro, Maryland. When should you use original sound in Zoom versus when not to use it? It seems like many leave it off to eliminate white noise, but doesn't that sacrifice audio quality?
Go ahead, Josh.
Yeah, so whenever you're playing anything that you don't want Zoom to process, like music, because it'll think that music is noise and try to filter it out, then you want to leave it off. If you've already taken control of your levels in audio and you want that quality to go through Zoom, then leave it off. And also, if you have open mics, then turn it on because Zoom will do a mix minus for you.
Go ahead, Jeff.
If you are using speakers, you need to leave original sound off.
I go ahead, Mickey.
I use original sound. I don't use original sound when I'm here at home because I have an AC blasting, and Zoom does a pretty darn good job with their noise suppression. So if you don't have an ideal environment, then trust the processing.
Yeah, go ahead, Jason.
The reason that you've heard people go back and forth about it on the panel is because it's a matter of raising the bar. So anytime original sound is on, your audio needs to be that much better. So even someone like Mickey, who absolutely can nail any audio system, is still going to go with, turning it off when it suits him. That's the point.
I think unless you're in a quiet environment with a mic with high off-axis rejection going into something that has its own noise control like noise assist, you should leave it off. you should leave the original sound off at this point, because I'm just listening to all of our panelists, and I just noticed that the white noise for me is very the white noise is more bothersome than anything they're losing on their voice. So so that's what that'd be my recommendation at this point. Next, unless you're doing music, and then we just deal with it. Next question.
David Paskin of Miami, Florida, here on the panel, says, just purchased my remotes t-shirt, wondering if there are any plans to release as a single and how I can join the next recording as a fellow musician.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
So releasing as a single is not on a roadmap of any sort. So of course, we're not planning to put it on CDs or vinyls or anything like that. You'll be able to find everything online, and we're working on where that's going to end up going. Being a part of the next one, all you have to do is join up on the Discord, and then go to the remote band Discord area, and then just say, hey, I want in, or contact any of the remote band members and say, how do I get in, and we'll direct you in there. Yeah,
I think we need to rethink the vinyl. I think releasing the remotes, the singles,
I'm all for
vinyl. Let's do some research. That'd be so cool. And you just buy them as, cool. Be like, they come with like a little little collector. You can get the remotes.
Can we do a cassette too?
No, cassettes aren't. I mean, they're not as classic. It's. Anyway, all right.
Track,
wax. I think wax. Yeah,
wax cylinder.
Oh yeah, that's what we should do anyway. All right. Next question.
Pull out my wire recorder. Anyway, moving on. Tony Mobley of Noonan, Georgia, is up again, and Tony, hi. Family member has purchased an M1 MacBook Pro, his first or her first MacBook. Please recommend tools, external monitor, and so forth, and additional software for the first-time Mac owner doing Zoom meetings.
Go ahead, Jason.
Well, there goes the hour. No, I'll put some links in. OWC, get a dock. That will save you at least $200 in adapters. And as far as monitors go, sky's the limit. It's really all over the place.
Go ahead, David.
I was going to say the same thing. A dock I would suggest for me is the CalDigit TS3, which seems like it's currently out of stock, but it's a really solid one.
Yeah, and I think that, the other thing to think about as you start, I think you don't need anything to do that, but the things that start to become interesting are ATEMs and, those types of things as well. If you really want to start pushing it, but you can open it up and just start using it. Brio, would be a good place to start as well. Next question.
Tyler Roberts in Chambersburg says, looking for recommendations for a wireless microphone for a youth room. I need selectable frequency using Shure BLX series and experiencing interference.
Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, first off, I would recommend talking to other venues or sound engineers in your area and ask them about what frequencies work best in your location. Most of the wireless systems come in frequency bands or frequency blocks, and some blocks are congested in some areas, and some are wide open. So talk to other engineers. The most affordable system I would start recommending, especially for anything live, would be the Sennheiser G4 system. Those run about, I think, 650 US or 700. Go for the 100 series, but if you can, go for the 300 series. But you didn't mention a budget. So if you have the budget, the Shure Accent Wireless, which is the cream of the crop for event sound, wireless sound, and there's also Electrosonics. They also make rack mount systems for venues.
Jeff?
Contact your local sound company installer. They probably have the ability to come in and do a frequency scan and reprogram your devices on clean channels. And that you may not need to buy anything, just pay a fee for them to do that.
Yeah, and I'm not clear exactly what you're using it for, but a lot of, unless you're using Plantronics or FreeSpeak for some reason, the Shure microflexes are pretty useful as a general purpose. They're not the cheapest, but as ease of use, and they completely sidestep most of the frequency issues that we've had in other places because they're using an entirely different platform. Now they are on a 2.4 platform, so you may have other things that you have, but we have had almost no interference when using them in the right country. We have had some clicking when we're using them in the wrong country. All right, next question.
Our own Mickey Beckacor here in the panel from the Philippines says, who initially thought of the possibility of dialed-in attendee degrading the audio experience on Zooms? Props and respects to whoever it was that diagnosed that in the after hours.
Genius. Stuart?
I think it was Carl. And then it was Rupert who ran with the idea of let's go and test this in a separate and mention webinars versus meetings and what have you. But I would also like to point out Jeffrey Powers made sure to jump in and point out that we shouldn't exclude people from dialing into after hours on phones and what have you, and reined everybody back in. And after that person who had dialed in at the time decided to leave, there was a little bit more testing before Rupert and everyone went and created the evidence for Zoom.
We're not gonna do it in after hours unless we're doing some kind of music thing, but we will probably not use it if we're going around a music thing. Yeah, we're not gonna make a general rule about it yet. Next question.
Chris Widener in Lafayette, Indiana comes up next, and he says, is there a resource that I can give presenters to convince them to dump text off of slides? I've talked, but I need proof to give them.
David?
I just produced something last night, and I think that part of the problem is that presenters don't realize that they can have their notes somewhere else. They think that the slides are not only for presentation, but are also their notes. And so maybe showing them how to use notes in PowerPoint or Keynote or Google Slides. But boy, is this an important thing to do.
Rupert?
Yeah, I mean, obviously reading text takes time, and in a remote, virtual hybrid type scenario, it's whether do you want your people you're presenting to spend time reading or spend time looking at you. I mean, people are talking about needing human connection, and if you're showing them slides and only slides, you're losing out on the one time window you have to make a connection with them.
Jason?
The human brain is incapable of simultaneously reading and listening critically. So which would you prefer? Put it that way.
The highest profile use of some kind of deck is Apple. So the Apple keynotes are the highest profile use of a deck. So you would think that they have all the money in the world to spend on their deck. That's probably the gold standard. So if you look at the deck and your deck looks busier than their deck, the great thing is that the app that they use to do that is free. So the thing is that it's not about money. When you look at the graphics that they do there, they're not the most impressive graphics in the world. They dog food their own stuff. You'll see the stupid little animations that they use, for their thing. They're using the app. They're not overriding it with motion or After Effects or something else. They're using their little little presentation app that is free, that comes with every Mac. And so if it's busier than that, you're probably, that's the gold standard, and you're just moving away from it. It is, I think that the thing that we also have to really get is your classes and your presentations were really boring. The only reason people were showing up was because of the food and hanging out with other people. But your thing that you were doing in front of them was boring, and so the thing is that what you now have to do is you have to actually live on the quality of your event, the quality of your content. And it's not, the reason people are bored with Zoom is not because of it's not because Zoom is boring. It's because it was always boring. Like, it was always hard to watch. It's just that before we could, now we can just turn it off or push it off, or it's just much worse because it has to sit on that. There's no energy and there's no coffee. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael's up next with, what made you go with the Final Cut versus Resolve for editing the remotes? And wouldn't it be a hassle transporting content to and from Resolve? I guess that's for me.
Yeah, it's for you.
Yeah. What made me go with Final Cut is I know it better than anything else, and I love the program. I feel as fluid with it as pianists should feel with their keyboard. So it's thoughtless operation for me at this point. And it's exceptional at compositing, and this was mostly a compositing video. Most of my time really was spent working on things like black levels, and I'm sure other NLEs have tools that allow you to do that as well, but that was critical for this one, and the tools in Final Cut were really good for that. So that was most of it. In terms of to and from Resolve, Charles doesn't seem to, he never pops back to me with there were issues with what I send him. Normally he gets a 4x4 ProRes master and he goes from there. I also sent him individual contributions prior so that he could color correct those before I worked with him in my storylines, which truly helps. If you have the time to do that, to decide kind of what you're going to use in your storylines or timelines, and then get that off to a colorist so they can correct them and it comes back. That solves a whole bunch of problems at the end of everything. Hope that helps.
Yeah, I will say that having done a lot of the back and forths, I probably, if I was editing and I knew that I was going to do high level color, like if I was going to go into a high dynamic range or whatever, I'd cut it all in Resolve, regardless of how good I am at it. And I've done that because the back and forth is it really, you have to lock everything down to do that. So it's a harder plot way to do it, is to, if you're going to color and Resolve. That's the great thing about the edit, is that, ours is the remotes one was relatively simple from a color perspective, but so it probably worked fine. But if you get into a point where you're editing at the same time you're coloring, it's really painful to use a different platform. Next question.
Raziel Panic in Boston, interesting name. Sorry about it if I got it wrong. Anyone aware of an HDMI encoder other than the ATEM Minis that has UVC drivers signed so that they work with macOS FaceTime?
Go ahead, Jason.
This is an all over the place question. I will answer it. Yes, the web presenter will do it. The web presenter HD will do it. The web presenter 4K will do it. And even the new HyperDecks will do it. The reason it's an all over the place question is because macOS hasn't used UVC or USB video class drivers. That's a Microsoft thing since 2008. So that doesn't really track, doesn't matter.
Go ahead, Alan.
I literally just covered it then, so I yield my time.
Yep. Next question.
James Babbitt in San Diego says,
Mickey, I meant to say next. I meant to go to Mickey next. Sorry about that. Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, I've had extremely good luck with the AJA UTAPs. Very, very solid machines. Haven't had them go down once.
Magewells should also show up for FaceTime, as well as the Camlinks. I think all of those will work in that environment. Next question.
James Babbitt now comes up with it on the ATEM Mini Extreme ISO. How do you use XLR connectors instead of the 1/4 inch or 1/8 inch TRS stereo audio inputs?
Go ahead, Mickey.
If you do have to go through the analog 1/8 inch inputs on the ATEM Mini, you can get your long bounce connection, your bounce line XLR connectors, and feed it into something like a Radial Engineering J-ISO. The J-ISO will turn that +4 dBu bounce connector into a -10 dBV mini jack connection.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael's up next, and Douglas says, in a space-related discussion group I'm in, the power consumption of a large broadcast, that's Olympic rock concert, etc. kind of area, was used as a point of comparison. What specific departments would probably use the most energy?
Go ahead, Stuart.
It's actually twofold. Now, you might think it's vision or audio. It's not. They're not even close. It's lighting followed by air conditioning, although that can also be swapped around the other way, because lighting creates the most heat and you've got to get rid of it. Same with keeping all the gear cool. Air conditioning pulls massive amounts of current in any broadcast facility, any studio facility. Even getting cooling air into when you're shooting outdoors it's essential.
Go ahead, Rupert.
Stuart covered two of my points. Also, when I've seen these studies over the energy consumption of broadcast, sometimes like inverse in comparison to online streaming, they take into account the end-to-end pipeline. So the venue, the distribution, and in true like RF terms, the broadcast power. So you're 50,000 watts on top of a hill somewhere.
Mickey.
Yeah, on top of that, for large events, think of the transportation. A lot of these events are shipping, like the Olympics, thousands and thousands of those 40-foot containers.
Next question.
Next question from Douglas Carmichael. And Douglas says, personally, I've spent time listening to office hours or after hours through an iPhone 6s Plus connected to my car stereo via Apple CarPlay. Would that degrade the quality of the audio if it is transported via cellular data?
Go ahead, Rupert.
So in our testing yesterday, joining via a mobile client, the Zoom app through a phone didn't change the quality of the meeting. However, in my experience, joining on a phone in a car attached, I haven't used CarPlay, but attached via Bluetooth, the audio experience is different to you if you're listening to voice or whether somebody is sharing in content through the either share screen or share computer audio. So that can actually affect your experience rather than the entire meeting.
Go ahead, Jason.
Rupert nailed it.
Yeah, and the thing is that I think that I, with most, not just Zoom, but with Blue Jeans, with other things, I have gotten to the habit of I join on my phone, even if I'm using cellular, I do never dial in anymore. You know, like it's our cellular connections are better than our phone connections at this point in most places. As we move to LTE and 5G, the transport is leans towards data and away from the voice transport. So the phone services I'm just finding are much less stable than the data services going to most phones. And so you're usually better off with most of these services just to log on to the app as opposed to calling in. Next question.
Kelsey Malloy is up next from Philadelphia and says, I've had a sudden issue with my smart video dub clean switch 12x12. It will not connect to the Video Hub software. I noticed the Ethernet port light on both of my Video Hub and my switch are yellow-orange. Is that light a bad sign somewhat, and what does it mean?
I don't know. It usually, if you don't see it blinking, it's not communicating. So if you don't see them, and so if they're yellow and orange, the first thing I would do is change the cable. You know, like the first thing to do is to swap out your Ethernet cables.
Could be a packet collision, but I'm not sure on that particular unit.
Yeah, I would. The first thing I would do is I'd replace the cable with a cable that I've proven works somewhere else, and then I would restart all the machines, like unplug them, wait 10 seconds, plug them back in. And see if that fixes anything. And if not, I'd call Blackmagic. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael's back with many international broadcasters are still using shortwave radio despite the dominance of the internet. Would shortwave still have a place despite its shortcomings?
Go ahead, Jason.
Oh, absolutely. In fact, it's enjoyed kind of an extended golden era because of software-defined radios. But yes, as far as practicality, absolutely. Natural disasters, good old-fashioned geekery, just understanding physics, it's absolutely useful.
Yep. Next question.
Douglas
I'm sorry. I'm dealing with two different windows. I'm still having a problem with both windows. So let's go. Can we go back now? I don't know if we can. Sorry, I skipped over some folks here. I apologize. We'll go to the next question, but I apologize to the panelists. I'm still having trouble with the new interface. Next question.
All right, Douglas Carmichael's back up with what resources would you recommend for learning Blender? I've heard it can be difficult to learn despite being a deep program.
Go ahead, Stuart.
The depth of Blender's capabilities is what makes it a difficult program to learn, as well as it being open source and having multiple what's the correct term, philosophies of how to do the interface. But you're obviously going to need a decent CPU and a decent GPU, but the one resource you absolutely need to do for Blender is time. It takes a long time and it will just take effort to do.
You know, I went back to Blender to see how I've modeled in a lot of different things. And I went back to it. And if you don't have, if you're cost constrained, Blender is fine. But otherwise you just learn Cinema 4D. Like if you can afford it, the modeling tools are so much better that I just, you know, and there's so much, it's so much more scalable. Because I was thinking about trying to figure it out and whether we're going to try to introduce, you know, Blender into this group and everything else. And I'm probably not, just because I find, as someone who's modeled in a lot of things, that the modeling tools, there are models out there that are amazing that people built in Blender, but it's really kind of backwards the way that they build it, in my opinion. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael's next with Dave Natale, Rolling Stone's front of house mixer, mixes the band without any compression, gating, limiting, or effects. Wouldn't not using any dynamics control be the equivalent of flying without an autopilot or instruments with today's modern productions?
Go ahead, Mickey.
If it sounds how they want it to sound and it sounds good, then it's good.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if it's working, he's figured it out. Like, so it might be hard for everyone to do that, but if you're really skilled, you can get away with a lot of things. If you really, you're talking about someone who really knows the music, that they know the music, they know the system, and they built a pattern that worked. So, but I wouldn't necessarily mean that doesn't mean it would copy to other things well. All right, we're going to let's kick these. We're going to kick these back. These lower voted questions here because we're going to switch gears. So let's start populating it with the NAB. We're going to change directions and start with NAB Plans. We've got a ton of questions here. So for those of you who are watching, if you have questions or comments or suggestions about how we should cover NAB. I think that, we had some big plans of how we were going to do it. Admittedly, with the resurgence of COVID, I felt like I don't want to build up a large, there's two things. One is I don't want to build up a large number of people together and be accountable for that. Number two is I started feeling like as we start doing our second hours, as our second hours get better, I'm not sure I need the format the way I thought I would. And then also, a lot of vendors that I know that we would have gone to visit at their booth are not going, or and I don't think I can say who, but they'll say what they're going to say when they say it. But a lot of people are quietly dropping out or lowering their profile at NAB. And so, so I think that it just doesn't seem like it made sense. So we want to cover it. And we also want to think about not just how NAB is affected, but really, how we think about conferences and how we think about covering conferences and what we think actually will make sense. So anyway, so let's go ahead and if you have comments or questions, go ahead and you can put comments in, not just questions, into the NAB to give suggestions inside of this, and we'll address them. So jump in. Let's go ahead to the next first question or comment.
First question comes from Chami Chance in St. Paul, Minnesota. He says, is office hours going to have a booth? That would seem to be a great opportunity to bring key vendors into the office hours space.
Go ahead, Jason.
I have this theory that maybe John Preto have you ever been to a trade show when like somebody doesn't show up for that booth, right? Maybe John Preto can just sit down at that booth and just put a MacBook on there. But no, I'm pretty sure we're not going to have a booth.
Yeah, I mean, I just didn't want to have anything that was officially office hours around something that could potentially be a super spreader. So I just, I didn't want to have anything that was like someone touching lots of things that everybody else is touching. So I've always been a little bit of a germaphobe about things, and I think that it increased it a little bit in our current situation. So so I think that we're not going to put a booth out or have anything that is going to require lots of interaction with people. We had thought about trying to get a studio that was in one of the rooms but I think that just hasn't gone anywhere. And now I think that, again, even the vendors that we were looking at partnering for that are, I think, not going in the way that we thought that they would. So I think that it's not going to pan out for us to have a physical setup there. Next question.
Rupert McRae, Dallas, Texas, says, in a promotional email, NAB show asks, want in on the latest streaming innovations, offering exploration into, quote, new event streaming technologies and workflows that'll help you remain competitive. What might NAB show have to offer in this regard?
Go ahead, Jason.
I can't help but think I just got an email that Showstoppers has invited me, as credentialed press to that thing. And I'm thinking, are they going to send craft services like to everybody's house? But no, I mean, I have no idea. I think they're grasping at straws, and even they don't know yet.
I think the big challenge for folks that are trying to restart a physical conference is that they just really want to go back to physical conferences. And so instead of spending a year figuring out how to do something great virtually, they fully committed to doing something physical. To your point, I think that they're just trying to figure out how to now, in a rush, solve the problem again. Next question.
Moving on, Tommy Shantz is back again, and Tommy says, when broadcasting live, by what means do you get your stream to the internet? I doubt you have anything plugged into Cat 5.
I think that we are
I don't think that's an NAB question.
By the way, Bill, you can't change them if you you got to keep them. You got to keep them in sync. So I just moved that one up because you didn't move it. So
and then
you
they
delete
moved
it,
again.
and I can't see it.
All right,
So
but
it's super important before you ask the question to move it up because it screws up all the metadata in the back end. So I mean, like literally, it will ruin the next step of what we're doing. You have to hit answer before you ask the question because it builds all the super sources and everything else. So it's an absolute must have. Anyway, so so what were we talking about? To get broadcast out of a venue, a lot of times we try to use something like the switch. Like they have internet, but the internet's super expensive and you're dealing with everything. But the switch is usually what we try to use to get out of a place like the Moscone Center, but we're not going to need to do that. Next question.
Sky Gleason's up next. Within the past, NAB has been important to me for both technical knowledge and social business relationships. Now with both of these things available on the internet, why should I go to NAB?
Go ahead, Sky.
Well, this is how I've built a business and created relationships and often gotten work. And so now that we are on the internet, yes, we would also see some fascinating architecture at NAB. We'd see some amazing shows. Those were other ancillary concepts. So I guess that's where I'm listening to your question of how do we not kill each other, but still move forward as humans in an industry. So it's a legitimate question.
Go ahead, Jason.
I guess what I was after here was, do you mean this year is Sky, or is this more of an ethereal, like, from now on?
Specifically, one step at a time. Yeah, this year specifically.
For me specifically, I got credentialed and I'm not going, but of course the utility is honestly this year I was looking forward to meeting many of you, and oh well.
Yeah, go ahead, Jeffrey.
So last year when everything canceled, I started on Geekazine, the virtual conference coverage, which was basically that I would connect up with them on Zoom, and then we'd have a one-on-one conversation, hopefully with them having good audio, good video, and being able to do a side chain to show off the product that they had in tow. I've had some good success with it, and I've done a few. Last one actually was the Elk Live interview a couple weeks ago, and so it does fulfill a certain level, but there is also a certain level that it doesn't fulfill, and the biggest level is that hands-on ability for a lot of products that that just aren't shipping just yet, and being able to get that video of that hyperdeck or camera or something like that, you just don't get that tangible aspect to it. But otherwise, yeah, it could be done virtually, just not to the level that I want it to be.
Yeah, I mean, I think that one of the values that I think that we'll miss from NAB is that a lot of times I spend a lot of time in the little 10-foot booths, like the 30, 20 and 30 and 40-foot booths. I already know what they make, and I do get to talk to some folks, but I can generally set those meetings up on my own. But I can have a meeting with most of those folks as needed. But the little 10-foot booths of new things that are coming out, or some little company that, and from a coverage perspective, one of the things that I really liked is that I posted something on, there was like a little company, you could tell that this is just what they did, and they made little cassette tapes for hard drives. And I remember I did some little video on it, and it got a ton of views, and I got these emails from them later about how much they sold, from this one little video that I had done. And that felt really good of like, hey, we covered something that you didn't know that is really useful. They're doing a great thing, and we can help push them forward. And we try to do that with our second hours, is finding folks that are releasing stuff and giving them a chance to, get in front of a bunch of people that might be interested. And so I think that it's just a matter of figuring out how we can increase that discoverability for smaller vendors. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael's up next. With the world moving on with the trajectory it is, wouldn't it be safer for us to sidecast NAB, i.e. show product announcements or similar marketing content while commenting on it?
Jason?
I mean, I think it'll almost certainly be partially that. If the goal here of this hour is to figure out what we're going to do for NAB, it's hard to do this in Q&A. The way I picture it, at least, is that each of the panelists undoubtedly have some contacts. There's going to be a lot less happy accident running into the 10-foot booths that I too like. But you know, I'm the way I'm picturing it is, you know, there's always a flurry of communications around NAB, and perhaps we can simply just, you know, pull these people in after the show for a second hour. It's my thought.
Yeah, I think that what I'm trying to figure out from my perspective is, number one is we have a handful of people. I think Chris Fenwick's going, Jeffrey may be going, I think Carmi's going, Sky's going. I think it'd be interesting to try to get, and it could just be the second hours all during NAB is just a discussion, and we just hopefully get those folks on, the people who are there, and we really ask them, like, what are you seeing and what are you looking at? And maybe they can grab some images and send them to us, or some videos of things that they thought were cool, and we really make it more of them doing a show and tell of what they saw the day before, you know, and what they, you know, some videos or stills, and talking about what's cool and having us ask questions and, you know, that type of thing during the week of NAB. And then I think that what we really start pushing, and I think that there's launch events, we might want to look at those, but I think that the other thing we might want to look at is during the launch events, do we, for some reason I'm distracted because I feel like are we stuck on, oh, never mind. It's just the way that this thing is showing up on my thing. Anyway, so during the launch events, I think that we might want to show some of those, and we'll have like after hours, but I think we could stay with the regular hours and then look for everything we want to bring in. And for the next 2 or 3 weeks, the second hours are all NAB. Like they're just, you know, like they're different. We're looking for like the next 4 weeks, we're looking for 4 audio things, and we're looking for 4 video things for Wednesday. And we're looking for 4, you know, like we're trying to fill out, you know, 15 or 20 different subjects that we saw at NAB that we want to cover. And some of them we'll know ahead of time, because I'm already talking to some of the vendors about it. So some of them will know what their release is, and we know when to schedule them, but other ones we could fill in. But I think that might be, rather than stopping everything, because I still feel like the future is not going to be single events that are 3 days long or 4 days long. I think it's where we're going is just being able to have this happen in a regular managed schedule the way we have it now. Next question.
Rupert McRae in Dallas, Texas asks this: at least 3 other shows are co-locating with NAB show, the radio show, the Sales and Management Television Exchange, and the AES, the Audio Engineering Society show. Are there other shows joining the list, and is co-locating a viable model overall?
Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I mean, these things have happened together for a long time. And I think that as the crowds get smaller, the NAB people are going to be, you know, trying to make the crowds bigger because there's a critical mass. I still think that we're missing a huge opportunity. I think, Alex, you should be climbing all over every one of those companies that you don't want to mention, and I respect that aren't going, and say, come be on our show. Come be on our show. I'm wondering if maybe we need to charge people to be on second hour so that they understand that there's a value associated with it. And maybe we charge them to be on second hour, but we have an NAB 2021 special, and we'll let you in for free because you're invited.
Yeah, I'm not right now. I'm not.
I'm saying 10, 20 grand.
Man,
and you get an hour. You get an hour of unfettered Q&A. You get to explain. It will be the best presentation of your product ever. It's only 20 grand.
What I prefer, to be honest with you, what I'd prefer is for them to spend $10,000 to $20,000 on, like, us require a certain level of quality, and take that $10,000 or $20,000 and put it into their studios so that we can have a good video of what they're doing, and they don't come in over webcams and bad audio. So you know,
part of my 20 grand would be setting them up. You know,
let
Shannon do what she does, make it wonderful, but that's what it costs.
I do think that what I want to do is, I don't necessarily want to charge them yet. It's not a bad idea, but I don't want to charge them yet. But what I do want to do is set up a, like, hey, if we're going to bring you in as a second hour, you know, we're going to do a check with you. We're going to set this all up, and you got to get to a certain bar. Like, and I warn people, and people are getting better and better at it. If you look at the second hours, our participants are getting better at doing that. But we're going to start sending out, like, this is the kit you should have. And there's going to be some point in our future where we have kits, you know, like little mini vendor kits that we just mail to you, like set this up, you know, and here's a close-up camera and a wide camera and a thing and a thing and a thing, and you set it up, and we wire into that. I think that we're going to get to that point someday, but right now what I need them to do is not jack it up by not taking it seriously. And so I think we're kind of beyond that. And I think that if we only have a handful of slots, if we say we have 16 slots that are available for 4 weeks, or 20 slots or whatever that are available, and we say we're not going to put you into that slot unless we've tested you and we know that you're going to give us a good setup, and you're going to give us a real person to talk to, and we don't want to talk to the salespeople. And so so I think that that's going to be interesting. So we'll see where that goes. Yeah, Bill.
Like other people, I've been going NAB for 20 years here, and it's just been interesting to watch it evolve. And in the last few years, there's been a noticeable kind of decline. I mean, after they built the 2-story South Hall and it got really huge there for a few years, we started seeing big areas of original North Hall were kind of unoccupied. This was going to be an interesting year if it happened in person, because they talked a lot about whether or not people were going to come. And in fact, this year was the first year they had moved to a Saturday, Sunday, kind of a more consumer focus. NAB used to start on Monday through Thursday. So it was only people who were business oriented who could take the time off to do it. So they wanted a consumer kind of influx to keep their crowds up, I think. Then, of course, COVID hit. And then this year we've had the Delta variant surge. And so I don't know. I feel pretty sad for them because it's been a terribly difficult thing for their business model. I'm hoping they find a way to make gathering for the people who really love that and want to do that safe again and powerful again. But it's going to be a tough time. And all the things that Alex has been talking about here for the past year are the keys that have been causing it to be less and less relevant as it goes. So there's got to be some way. I'm hoping they're smart enough to figure out that some way to make it continue to be something, because it was great to meet people. It was great to be able to sit down for those lunches and those accidental. I met an engineer on a cab ride to McCarran, and we really hit it off and we exchanged cards, and now they're my friend. I miss that tremendously.
I think that beyond the sentimental, I think that the thing that we've talked about when we talk to vendors is when you're doing marketing, there's a magic that you don't really know exactly which part is working and which part isn't. So until you pull a big variable out, you don't really know how much it was adding to your sales, how much was it adding to the bits and pieces, And so what happened is we pulled conferences out of the system. A lot of vendors have made the observation that I've talked to that their sales have not gone down without the conferences. And that's why the conferences really need to start up again, is because they're like, we're not, we're doing just as much or more or way more than we were doing before. And we're not spending money on conferences. And so for the vendors, they're starting to look really hard at that expense because they're not certain. Now that could be a short-term gain and not a long-term gain. So there's still a bunch of people thinking about it, but there's a lot of vendors that are starting to do the math of like, we didn't lose any sales, on not going to the conference. We're still, operating at that speed. And so that's going to be really challenging for not just NAB, but for everybody. Go ahead, John.
What I think I'm going to miss about NAB was the work that I did with the California State Parks, because there were a lot of serendipitous meetings, and our first experiment with underwater drones came from a contact at NAB. Improved switchers at our studios came through informal contacts at NAB. I'm the typical professor, so they think I'm coming with my hands up for getting gear, but it turned out we got a lot of gear and a lot of support through NAB. So I'm trying to figure out how that's going to work without a conference like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I am thinking hard about like, how do we create that interactive experience to some degree, and by the way, if you're watching, if you're in Discord, Chris Fritchie put up something that in the office hours chat that you should check out especially if you have an iPhone. It's a USDZ of some screws from one of his devices that he works at work, but it's interesting. Like, like that is the future of being able to open up an object, move it around, and imagine, like when I start thinking about some of this stuff of being able to have an object, move it around, and actually ask questions, so if I could take a new Blackmagic switcher, have it sitting in front of me, with my phone and eventually maybe something that's more mounted on my head or whatever, and be looking at it and then be pointing at buttons going, okay, what does this do? What does this do? What does this do? What does this do? And someone talking about it, I'm not sure I'm getting that much more out of being at the conference, because I'm having something at scale that I can rotate around and look at. So I think that there's a lot of really interesting, it's just what Chris posted is just tiny little drop in that area. We're doing a lot of work on the back end related to that. Next question.
Rupert McRae, Dallas, Texas. Next question. NAB show is offering free passes for next year and free passes for this year when you invite 10 friends with a chance to win $100 concession coupons. Is this normal behavior?
Go ahead, Jason.
Categorically, no. This is usually when, if history was any indication, they would start stopping, the free passes, and they'll usually pop it up maybe a week before. And $100 in $17 Sparrow pizza. I'm like, what? Are you kidding me?
Right. Yeah, Jeffrey.
So a lot of times this actually does happen every single year, where and some of it is behind the scenes. You don't get contests and things like that, but usually vendors are the ones that will come and say, hey, we'll give you a free ticket if you want to come to our booth and things like that. But it's rarer that the actual convention group will do that as publicly as they've been doing.
Almost nobody who goes to NAB more than once or twice. If you get on anybody's email list, any booth, after the first time you did it, you're never paying for NAB again as long as you read your emails, because you're getting coupon codes from and that's CES, NAB, all of these. They send out coupon codes to make sure that you can get to the expo. And so that is not unusual. The $100 concessions is unusual, but not very expensive. When you think of a show that probably costs $50 to $100 million to do, giving away $100,000 worth of 1,000 of those 100, but they don't tell you how many. They might have only bought like 10 of them. And said, you have a chance to win $100, to share it out. So, but it's going to be a hard winter for a lot of conferences, and so they're doing everything they can to get people in. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael says the NAB show is requiring proof of vaccination, but have those attending thought of using high filtration masking, any 95 FFP2s or equivalent, and/or powered respirators units like the Broad Air Pro?
Go ahead, Bill.
I don't know what the floor is going to be like, but I will say that the floor for all of the history of NAB has been a crowded and packed environment. They may manage to mitigate that this year, but it is going to be as dense an event if it's anything like the past. And so strapping on some sort of air filtration system would be radically impractical, because there's a lot of ground to cover. I think it would be too hard. I do know that if I had to go on the floor, I might steal my brother-in-law's old, he used to work for the Colorado School of Mines and has these respirator masks that are unbelievable. But I just think no. And in terms of the vaccination thing, I will note that I've done 3 passes inside of an event where my California state QR code has gotten me through the door really easily. So they're starting to roll out some of those systems for proof of vaccination. It makes that a lot easier than it used to be. So just a random note.
I really want the Dune mask. If you look at the thing, I really want that Dune mask. I just want it to be actually workable, that it actually works, and have a big Dune mask. It would be cool. By the way, in case you're wondering, I did some research. I talked to some folks that could make the thing like that. The first one is $4,000 to build the first Dune mask. If you wanted to have one that was like really authentic, looks like it. And then they'd be $500 after that. So if we had enough people, we could get the price down. I'm just saying, if we had enough people, I have the people that can make them.
That come with or without a still suit.
But it would just be the one handmade Dune mask for it. It would be great. Anyway, we're running out of time because Dune's going to come out soon. So, but right during that, I was really looking at it, and a couple of us were talking about it, but we couldn't find enough people that wanted to order it. So that I just wanted to get it down to like $1,000 each. I know it's completely absurd, but it would be fun. All right, next question.
Eddie Scott in Mission Viejo, California is next. He says, could we dress Jason up in a hazmat suit, give him a camera, maybe a GoPro, and experience the show vicariously?
Well, I'm honored that of all the perspectives here, you're going to pick mine to be vicariously experiencing the show through. I do have a carbon mask somewhere here, but no, I mean, I'm just
hazmat. It has to be a hazmat suit.
A full
Yellow.
hazmat suit.
Yellow,
okay,
with the big window in the front.
with the full-on outbreak, like the Dustin Hoffman hood. Oh yeah. Eddie, I don't think you've ever been on the show floor. That would not be comfortable under any circumstances.
I don't know. I think we should build one, like build a hazmat suit with a little AC unit.
Be the only way to socially distance in that hall ever.
Well, it would naturally socially distance. Everyone would just get out of your way. They'd just stay away from you like we would get a lot of press for that. Just letting you know. Like, think about it, Jason. We still have.
I'll get the sumo suit. How about that?
Yeah, exactly. Sky.
Well, yeah, you could sponsor it. That's where you start putting names and labels like NASCAR.
We can put office hours on the back and have like black magic tags.
Well, we'll put an LED screen and then they can hire it by the minute, and we'll just walk around.
I will never work again. I'm just gonna, no one's ever gonna hire me for anything other than being that guy. Actually, that might be worth it.
See, you could be that guy.
You got the Dune. You got the Dune mask. They're not going to see your face anyway.
So. Oh no! I think we're now talked about like a big old the hazmat with a big old square, and then we get a little
mouse,
camera and
there you go.
Yeah. Oh man.
See, I love creativity.
We need to
make this work.
It's so much fun.
But you got to sell ad space.
No, it would be everywhere. It would be if Jason. I just want to point out, if you walk through NAB with a hazmat suit and a live view backpack. I do have two people. One person had the hazmat, one person with a live view backpack with a hazmat, and they're like, we're like covering it in. That would be.
Oh no! Like I would be on I'd be on CNN in 5 minutes because there's nothing. They never know what to do anyway.
But would you get past the radiology that they go
I have
through
a
at
press
the beginning?
pass. You would not believe they don't look at press at all.
Mm-hmm. Anyway, all right. Next question.
Those hamster ball suits that people get, that might be an interesting thing. Rupert McRae of Dallas, Texas comes up next, and he says, how could further health and safety considerations from NAB change the shape of the show and its coverage? The last update from NAB was on August 18th, in which they said further safety measures were under consideration.
I don't think the safety measures are the challenge. I think that it's a chain reaction of the vendors don't think people are going to show up. The people don't think the vendors are going to show up. And you could have safety inside the conference, but you're still bringing a whole bunch of people to Vegas. So I think that there's the safety inside the conference, I don't think is making that much of an impact. To be honest, I think that all those considerations are not having any real effect. Next question.
Mark Giuliani in Alexandria, Virginia is up next. And Mark says, is this an opportunity to work with NAB to broadcast the show over office hours or after hours?
I've thought about it. I don't have any strong contacts with the conference. We have worked with groups that, like, I've been either a host or done technical backends or done everything for people who are partnered with NAB, but I haven't been partnered directly. So I just don't have the right contacts to go down that path. And I'm very leery of the overall situation. We don't know. Traditionally, we don't know whether Delta will either get a lot better or a lot worse, but it probably won't stay the same. And because we can't calculate it at this point, I think I'd prefer to stay in my house. Next question.
Hey, Alex, have you talked to our friends at FMC? Are they still doing the conference thing? And might that be an input there?
Yeah, I haven't talked to them about NAB. I think that they have their way of doing stuff.
Understood.
So, next question.
Okay, Stuart Fairweather, Melbourne, Australia. Many of the media industry's website will do new style pieces from NAB of new products and may try to do that one-on-one in Zoom, etc. this year. If we were to pull guests in for second hours, who would be on the main folks to invite on list?
So you're talking about who we'd want to cover, Stuart? Like who would we want to grab? The short list, and someone should write these down.
We'd start with Grant and somebody from AJA, wouldn't we? We'd start with Grant Petty.
Oh, I'd love to have Grant on. It'd be fun. But again, we could get Grant on theoretically. It'd be hard to get him. And this comes down to, like, when we talk about sharing office hours, when we talk about building it up, when we get to a certain number, we can invite anybody, and that's part of why we're tightening office hours. When people think, why are you changing office hours 2.0 and making office hours tighter and adding graphics and doing all those things? Because as we build that up and as we get more viewers, so when we have 1,000 or 2,000 concurrent viewers on YouTube or across many platforms, and it looks really great and it's tight and all these things move really fast. It just makes it much easier for us to invite people. Like that's the bottom line, is that it gives us access to people, and even when a lot of the hard work is being done in after hours, office hours is this way for us to get introduced to folks and to do those things. And so, I mean, I think Blackmagic is one of them. If there's new things from Sound Devices, I mean, these are people that we have pretty warm contacts with. I think that, I'm going to be interested in different playback companies, that Softron and other ones like that. Atomos is another one where, I think they're taking some ground. Teradek is usually something that I'm thinking about the booths that I go to first, so these are I go to Blackmagic first. I usually wander over to AJA to look at whatever. There's an AJA breakfast on Monday or Tuesday, so I see whatever they're going to release and talk to Nick a little bit, and then go over to the AJA booth because they've always got a couple things that Blackmagic doesn't make, and they do it. They did it really well, and there's a lot of like the FS stuff and some of the other piping, and so I'm over there at AJA. I usually wander into the EVS booth and see how EVS, because EVS is a big piece of stuff I do. And then Cinema 4D. So, getting, if they release a new version, I don't know when they're going to, that sometimes lines up and sometimes doesn't, especially now. I'm trying to think about it. You can, I don't know, let's see, Jeffrey, other ones that you'd like to see?
Well, what's very interesting is you were talking about that, and Jason, you might be able to agree with me on this since you're also press, is usually when we go to these conferences at about this time, our email boxes are just completely saturated with emails saying, come to our booth, come to our booth, come. And a lot of times that's where we find these little vendors that we end up getting some content that just completely blows out. But that hasn't been happening for me. Now, usually what I would do is I would take these emails and I would put together a schedule, whether it be in the virtual side or at the conference side, where I'd be at their booth at 2:00 or whatever, or they'd come to me and then we do our interview, but that hasn't been happening. So I'm not exactly sure how we could actually do that with the smaller vendors. Granted, with Blackmagic and stuff like that, people, you can talk to them, but the smaller people, how do we get those people into an event like this?
Guess it's sumo suit time. No, I completely agree. There is no way to do that aside from on foot. It's just, and that to me, really is the happy magic of NAB.
And back to the, Showstoppers and Pepcom are the two that I probably see more of than anything else. Those two evening shows, because it's 10-foot booths, it's limited. And, I think that one of the things that's interesting that I look at, we designed a conference that never happened, but it was an AV conference. It was going to be a hybrid, actually. It was actually in the process of making this that I kind of semi gave up on hybrids, because we were designing this all out and we were going to have a handful of vendors. And what we did that was different was we were going to have a bunch of sessions where we have discussions and everything else in a circular stage with screens over top of it and everything else. So the online and in-room can interact with each other and interact with the folks that are there. The idea though was that the expo was designed for the online audience, not the people that are in the room. And what we did is we were designing the booths to be very, very shootable. That the booth was literally designed to shoot well rather than to be good for a lot of crowds. So the idea is that you have a camera team that's going to each booth, and that camera team represents 2,000 people watching, and asking questions and voting up questions for that vendor. And what you could be guaranteed as a vendor is that we're going to bring 2,000 people to your booth, at one time. You're going to do it once, and then we're going to move on, and you're going to answer all those questions over an hour, for them. And then we realized that, we could really just have one booth that we rebrand or whatever for each vendor. And between each session, just give them their own, we don't even have to have a whole, 6 booths for people to be at. We could just have one studio where they get to go up. And that was, I don't know, 5 years ago that we were kind of playing with that idea. And so we may still go back to that. I mean, one of the things that I've looked at for, 3210 where we have a big stage, is building up a big stage that, or even a small stage in a big room, and inviting vendors in so they just come in. So our conference is that we set that stage up, and there is a reason. This gets back into the physical limitations. There is a reason for us to have multiple people come in, do it all day over a weekend or whatever, because we have the stage and we have the set. And so we're kind of brought back to that, because that's the only way for us to get around the fact that these vendors don't invest in their own stage. Jason?
There's no way I'm the only one on the showstoppers list. Just to float it as an idea, this, virtual showstoppers, I'm not at all opposed to inviting these people. If they have a good pitch, I'm happy to grit my teeth and bear it through whatever they have planned a month early.
The showstoppers one, I've done a little bit of theirs, and theirs aren't too bad.
Well, I'm talking about this month early thing that came out a couple days ago. See if we can bring some of them in, and maybe the audience can actually see what showstoppers is like. Yeah,
absolutely. So we'll think about that some more. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael's up again with Samsung had a tryout program with the Galaxy Note 5 and S6 Edge a few years ago. Couldn't a tryout or loan program with sanitation replace the tactile experience with a product at shows like NAB?
Yeah, go ahead, Stuart.
Yeah, this is a double-edged sword. On something like the phone, you can get actually they send phones out to all sorts of reviewers to try and look at the success Linus Tech Tips. That's an entire channel built on doing exactly that. But I'm going to set the Wayback Machine to about 2015, and AJA did a try Scion program. The problem they had is that the people who they sent the cameras out to review had no idea how to deal with linear footage, and the reviews were, let's just say, negative is an understatement. So you've got to be very careful with when you're sending out hardware that you send it to people who can actually understand what the hardware does. In an industry like ours, when it's hardware that is specific to like different tasks, such as cameras, such as lenses, you need to have a reviewer who is familiar with doing that task as their primary job. Otherwise, you end up with somebody who is uninformed trying to review something that they don't understand, and that leads to negative sales.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Yeah, I totally agree on that. As being an influencer, I get products all the time. A lot of the times, if, like, for instance, a Blackmagic, if I'll get a Blackmagic camera, the first thing that they're going to do is they're going to put a piece of paper in front of my face that I have to sign, and then my credit card. And if I don't return it within that certain amount of time, they're going to charge my credit card for it. So I basically bought the product. Many different companies do that. You just have to get on the right lists. And once again, just like Stuart said, you got to be kind of accredited to give them the points that you'll do. And of course, also tell them, hey, I'm all for giving a negative review as much as a positive review. So if you're up for that, then bring it on.
One of the things that I think it would be interesting, again, from a studio perspective on our end, would be to have, again, us bringing the hardware, them sending hardware to one of us, maybe, that has a studio that can do close-ups and everything else. And then have us, again, ask questions. Like, I don't know if we all have to put our hands on it. Again, we have to think about we talk about how great that is, but we have to remember that we're still excluding 99.99999% of the world. And so the thing is that what we want is to have a place where the vendor's there to talk to us. We're looking at the product. And if it's an audio product, Mickey can't go to NAB, but we want him to be giving them the hard questions. How about this? And what does this look like? And if we have that product in line, one of the things I think that we could do, this is with or without NAB, is get the hardware in to wherever it makes sense to do that. And then have us say, hey, we're going to review the new Blackmagic 16K, or we're going to review this. What are the tests that we should put it through? And as a group, talk about, these are the things that we want to test. And this is the stuff we want to run it through this, and we want to run it through that, and we want to see it in front of a chart, and what kind of chart, and what is it going to look like, and then we show us doing it, like we're doing that. That's
a great idea.
And the thing is that we take that and we show all the tests live, maybe an after hours, maybe a second hour, maybe whatever that is, and we stream it all out of us doing all the tests and talking about it amongst ourselves and everything else. Then we bring the vendor in. So as a group, we all like test it. We don't all have to have the camera. One of us has the camera. All of us, are asking the questions. That person's doing the test that we have defined. And then we've all seen all the tests. We've all seen what we wanted to see out of it. And now we're going to bring the vendor in for the hot plate. and ask the hard questions that they may or may not want to answer. Go ahead, Bill.
I also, back when I was a contributing editor to a magazine, I used to get products to review. And I remember the Play Trinity came out at that era, and I got one. They sent me one and I had it. And the interesting thing to me is that because they sent it a month in advance and I had some time to really live with it, that truly informed the depth at which I was able to question whether the approach they had taken was correct or not correct. One of the things that's tough about NAB, that people who say, oh, I want to touch it and I want to feel it and I want to see how heavy it is, you can get some data from that, but you're really not living with these products long enough to really understand how they work in the real world. So this idea of getting something enough in advance so that you can do a decent diagnosis of how it performs in real field conditions is a big deal, I think.
And I think that to go back to this idea of why we're tightening office hours and why we want to spread people watching office hours, the office hours part, is because when vendors see a really clean show and when they see it, really tight and with the quality that the panelists already have here, and it's a tight conversation and all the bits and pieces work, and there's 1,000 people or 2,000 people watching. The thing is that we could get to a point where 3 or 4 of us get, loaners. And then we're trading notes. Different people are testing it. Some people are one person's taking it out into the field, one person's doing charts, and we could do something pretty incredible. But we need to show that it's worth putting that hardware at risk. To do that. Go ahead, Jason.
I love that idea, and I of course immediately go to, anyone with an iPhone and a solid lighting rig can absolutely create a USDZ of any product and share it. With everybody.
What I'd love to do is get to a point where someone, I think that right now the person that I think about the most is Chris Fritchie, because he does technical models so well, because that's all he does. I don't know, it's all.
Oh, is AutoCAD his thing?
Oh no, I think any 3D modeler is his thing. So anyway, if you look at, he's doing some modeling for me right now, and the level of technical. Of doing all the little bits from taking a CAD drawing and building it all out. And so starting with a USDZ, to your point, doing an object capture of something and then handing it off to someone that can build a real model that looks, and acts just like the one that you want to have there could be a really interesting thing. And you hand it back to them as like, okay, well, they can use it for whatever they want later. USDZ is about to become a really big deal. And being able to
It already is in my workflow. Like I've been using it for 6 months.
Yeah, but I think that it's going to get even bigger. And so I think we're talking about, wouldn't it be great to have a model? Any company worth their salt will have USDZ models that are available on their website in 1 year. Mark my words. Like this is going to happen really fast because they already have the CAD drawings, and it's just a matter of doing conversion to make it look good. And so we're starting to figure that out. Jeffrey. And by the way, a note on the USDZ thing that Jesse Schwartz figured out is out of Cinema 4D exporting USDZ. We couldn't get any services out, but GLB, you export GLB and then take it into Reality Converter and then push it out. Comes out great. So thumbs up. Jesse and Chris are on the front lines right now of.
Takes a little while though. Little bit of number crunching there.
It's pretty quick. I think it took Jesse a long time to figure it out, but I think that it's I just want to spread that knowledge back into our group so we keep on playing with it, because it's great work that Jesse and Chris are doing in the back end. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
I would be willing to take the lead on creating a brain trust or a panel of 5 or 6 people, where one person will get a product, and then we'll plan out a way to review that product, and then we can do a show where we would then break it down as best as possible, where the other people would ask questions while the one person is showing off the product. And then the next week's maybe somebody else on the panel would have the product, or we could do 2 products at once or something like that. But just something where we could really do an in-depth deep dive, and we could bring other people on, just like, Aaron Parecki does that, something very similar to that. So we bring him on for something very specific, and just have, something that's not after hours, not office hours, maybe office hours extra or something like that, that we could just have some fun and really
office hours product chainmail.
Yeah.
Equipment hours.
Yeah, let's figure out.
I'll volunteer to do any Blackmagic camera, any of them at all. I'm right here. I'm half an hour away.
If only you were nearby. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, let's keep brainstorming on that. Let's think about how we tie those bits and pieces together. I think it's a really interesting model that if anything comes out of today's discussion, it'll be the ultimate review model, office hours ultimate review. All right, next question.
Rupert McRae in Dallas, Texas is up next with NAB show seems to have engaged with tech YouTuber Nikki Sun from the Technicky Speaking channel to provide some live NAB coverage. Is this a new type of collaboration for NAB?
It's not a new one. I think the NAB has done a variety of those. Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, it's by no means new. And of course, that broadcast thing that's always before you enter into the hall, that's a third-party company. I know I've sat down, and I'm pretty sure Alex has too, to talk to these people, and they're at work, and, their job is to basically just, keep people talking. It's effectively the same thing, except, younger talent via YouTube.
Yeah, so I mean, I think they've definitely done that before. I know that Luria did it. Geek Brief did it one year where they did a lot of those things as well. So I think that's definitely been a model that's been used in the past. Next question.
Moving on to Rupert McRae of Dallas, Texas, and here on the panel. Rupert asks, do you think vendors and attendees who do attend in person might attract some criticism?
Go ahead, Stuart.
I think this isn't just an NAB issue, it's an any public event issue. The negative or the potential for negative publicity and the potential to be as we know, looking from the outside in, the US is a litigious nation. You've got lawyers for everything, and lawyers seeing a public event and somebody gets sick, they are going to think payday.
There's a lot of things.
So there will be a lot of negative press, a lot of potential for negative press.
Yeah, Mickey.
Yeah, exactly what Stuart said. And also, I would be critical of I mentioned this last time, the National Association of Broadcasters, not turning this into a fully broadcast event.
Yeah. Jason.
Does anyone remember the CES that happened right when was it Puerto Rico got hit by a hurricane and Twitter exploded with, oh, there's no electricity there and there's electricity here, and it was just this big to-do that was completely nothing at all. I certainly hope there isn't blowback to people who are doing what their jobs or they think that their livelihood requires. But it's inevitable with enough people.
The big challenge is if it turns into a super spreader event, it'll be the blowback.
Well, that'll be downright scorn, but yeah.
It'll be rough. If it actually turned, many people think that the CES that happened in 2020 was the super spreader event that spread it around the world. So, there's a lot of people on the back end that think that that's actually where you had a whole bunch of Chinese vendors that go to CES because they're showing stuff off. You have a whole bunch of people from all over the world, and it was right after that if you look at the curve, that CES was a key piece of the puzzle.
And it wasn't that great of a CES that particular year.
I saw it coming. I was like, oh, I'm not touching that one. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael's up again with Chris's idea to change vendors for second hours, in my opinion, would be
not change.
Oh, charge. I'm sorry. Thank you. Charge vendors for second hours, in my opinion, would be counter to the ethos of office hours, a global conversation where no one's left out. What about the small vendors and independent developers without the resources of a larger company?
Jeffrey.
As in getting that information, usually we'll just have to go to our Rolodex, because chances are we know people that know people that know people that can get a hold of these companies. And of course, we've probably passed by their booths at NAB in years past, and we've probably collected information that we can get to. It'll be a little bit of digging, but I think we could do it.
I think that to go back to Douglas's core point, which is that charging for it, again, I'm interested in them spending money on their own studio that they can keep reusing over and over again before they start spending money with us. I mean, there's some day where we have to make this sustainable. It won't be this fall, I'm still working on the 501c3. So much paperwork. I didn't know I could deal with so much paperwork. Anyway, so, there'll be ways to do it. I will say that I'm very hesitant to pay to play. That's probably the least likely thing that I would do. as opposed to now, if we wanted to say, hey, you want to do something every week and that we're going to dedicate an hour to you and there's something like that, and we're putting things up and making it work, and there's some other options there. But to be in a second hour, to be highlighted and to pay for it, I'd probably say, okay, what I need to know is that you're going to look good and sound good, so that when we're watching, I mean, we want to look at that we want to keep on pushing the vendors to get high quality, and that's what we haven't seen. Even if you look at, I think what Sound Devices was doing with the Sound Summit is a great idea, but it felt like only a handful of people really took it. A handful of the vendors took it seriously to the level that Sound Devices did, and so I think that was the bummer, and so I think that I just won't accept anybody that isn't. There's some point we push people towards looking better and sounding better as vendors coming in for the second hour. There will be some point where we send them you have to have this level or we're not going to have you on. And we're not quite there yet, but we're closing that gap pretty quickly. Next question.
Rupert here in the panel from Dallas, Texas is back again with, I have seen pictures on social media from attendees at other conferences showing sparsely attended floors. Does this make for good publicity, and might this happen at NAB?
I think it's super problematic, for conferences to have people not, they would have been better off not showing it than showing, not having a conference than to have a big empty space, because it's everybody is second guessing whether conferences make sense. And there's a lot of things in general are, they say fake it till you make it. So, I think that's the challenge that NAB has is that I think it's going to be a ghost town. I think that it's going to be the best time ever to shoot video, though. So for the folks that are on our side that are going, it's finally going to be quiet. No one's going to cut your shot. There's going to be a whole bunch of things that are going to be great about NAB for us, but for NAB and for the folks going, I'm not sure. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Yeah, this is going to be all expirable content as opposed to evergreen content. It's just like you will never see anything from last year's NFL games because there's no fans in the seats, and it's just going to look very empty for whatever highlight that they show. So it's going to be very, very rare that you see that. You'll see a lot of content from this year now that the fans are back in the seats. But with NAB, yeah, it'll just be stuff that you want to find out about, and then that'll be for this year only. Next year, we'll just throw it away and create new content when crowds come back, if crowds come back.
Next question.
Sky Gleason in Seattle here on the panel says, can there be a list created that people can vote on of the vendors office hours wants to see from an NAB?
Well, right now we have second hour suggestions, which we use, but I'm quite open to having something that's more general. So if someone pings Chad, or if Chad's listening right now, Chad's here. What we should do is right under second hour, just put in vendor requests, the people second hour vendor requests. So we separate that out, because in the second hour, there's lots of other things that we talk about. Oh, we really need to talk about live streaming. We need to talk about this, but let's put in vendors. And what's important is for people to vote on those. So, let us know which ones are the most popular that we really want to see. We can reach out. I mean, at this point, we can reach out to most of them and they'll come in and attend. But we could figure out how to make it more intense. Go ahead, Sky.
Well, and that's my question is, I will go to the things that I'm interested in, but as a community member, I want to support the community. And if I'm going to be there, and if we could double duty this and it's prioritized. I mean, I started, you said Softron and Teradek and AJ, those are of like interest that I'm interested in. So yeah, let's vote up some things and hopefully we get some direct information.
Yeah. And most of these companies I can call.
But if I'm going to be there, maybe there's a new widget.
Yeah, Bill.
Typically, there's also an NAB app that comes out prior to the show that allows you to see everybody who is going to be presenting there, everybody who has booths. I don't know whether they're going to do it, how they're going to do it, whether it's going to be comprehensive, whether people pull out the last minute. But if that happens, it's a great resource to download the app from the App Store, and you can go through and see everybody who's presenting and decide who you might want to visit. I did that and made maps of my route through the show floor for many years.
You go, Jeffrey.
I'd like to suggest if we do this in Discord that whoever's putting in the vendor ideas that we get a little bit of information, maybe an email or a contact or something like that, if they can do that.
I wouldn't
Otherwise, I have a feeling it'll be a little bit saturated.
I would feel, don't worry about putting the contacts in. I can get the contacts. I can get the contacts for anybody. Don't worry about me. Like I can get a direct contact to any company that shows up at NAB in less than 6 hours. You know, if you decide you want someone to go, now whether I can get them to come on or not is another thing. But getting to the company and having them respond and be part of it, I'm not worried about that at all. I'm just worried about knowing what people want. You know, as far as a group, you know, getting ideas of what we want there. And so, but yeah, don't worry about that. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael says another route to finding vendors professionals for second hours is also the organic discovery route. Case in point, me and ProtoStream. As Office Hours 2.0 grows, there will still be a place for said. Will there be a place for said organic discovery?
I think we have that every day with After Hours. I mean, it just happens organically all the time, and you know, and it's happening. I mean, I was in last night. We were hanging out. I missed most of the 5 o'clock hour today because I didn't get to bed until like 11 because I was hanging out with folks in the evening and telling stories I probably shouldn't have. Anyway, so but I think that After Hours is a great place for us to lab out things and figure things out and figure out what is going to percolate, you know, up into what Office Hours does. My goal is to again have Office Hours become bigger and better and cleaner and faster and something that people who don't get After Hours yet. After Hours is a weird thing for a lot of people. Like people just, you're like, well, yeah, you just leave it on all the time in the background while you're working and you're just listening to it. And they're like radio. Yeah, kind of like radio, but you can talk to the radio. Like you're listening to the radio, but you can join the call anytime you want. And by the way, as people are watching, you should really take advantage of After Hours. We're in a golden era of it. You know, I've done this enough with enough groups that I just know that you have to really enjoy it. As it gets bigger, it'll be different. It won't be worse. It'll just be different. There's really a special moment right now that we have in After Hours where it's just really, really fun, and it'll get harder and there'll be, you know, things that we have to deal with and everything else. Growth always comes with complexity. And so you just, you know, I would highly recommend, I'm now dedicating a computer to it this weekend. I'm building it up so that I have a computer that all it does is just join After Hours, you know, and just sits there so that I can just turn it on and turn it off and turn it on. Because right now the problem I have to drop out if I'm getting into a Zoom. So I have to drop out of After Hours, then come back in, and I'm just going to set up another account that is just the After Hours account that it just sits all the time and is always available, you know, as I go, because it's just incredible. Like just listening to everyone, and you'll see me sometimes with my chair up or even just my name, and a lot of times I don't turn it on because I don't want to be a distraction. You know, there's a great conversation going on between a bunch of smart people, and I don't want people to refer to me. Like I just want to listen, you know. And so it's a really, really great, and I think so. But to your point, I think that there is a organic thing that's happening there, and we'll experiment with a lot of things. And in Office Hours, we'll get longer. Like there'll be a point where both of them are happening at the same time, and you know there's where eventually Office Hours will be 24/7. Like there'll be, so that you think there'll be different subjects that we're talking about. You know, Office Hour, there'll be a general Office Hours that probably will change very little. Like the current structure of Office Hours will probably stay this way for a long time because I think it works, and I don't want to take that away. This gets back into there's magic, and you don't really know what part of it is magic. So we're going to leave that the same. But we will start adding other hours. You know, it might be review. There might be a second hour of things we want to talk about, but then there's a product review, you know, and other things that happen, like the audio day, maybe a day of audio, you know, that we're talking about, and then eventually a channel of audio, you know. So there's a lot of things that we could do, but we're not going to do any of that until we get bigger, because you can't keep subdividing the audience. Everyone will get overwhelmed. So you just have to do it slowly. All right, next question.
And Rupert McRae is back from Dallas, Texas, with how does the number of confirmed exhibitors compare this year to maybe 2018 or 2019?
Go ahead, Bill.
Way down.
Are they publishing the number?
Well, they've had maps of the show floor as it's proposed, and the only major vendor that I saw that had Blackmagic has a huge footprint. All the other things that you would have normally under other years expected, Sony, Panasonic, JVC, you know, there's all the old monsters who used to be the broadcast core of this broadcast show. I didn't see any of them on there. Now, I don't know for a fact that they don't have a presence, but they didn't have those Keystone booths where Sony used to set up and have 60 cameras and all set up with live models and the rest of that. It didn't appear that there was room for any of that stuff. Although I just got one glance as I went by it, so they may have changed, but it was, if it's 15, 20% of the floor footprint, that's kind of the impression I got from what they published.
I actually think that Blackmagic taking on such a large space might have scared some of the other vendors off, because they weren't ready to put that large of a space up, and the press would have come out of like, Sony's got a 40 by 40 booth and Blackmagic's got 120 by 120. You know, this all gets into optics, and this is the complexity that's happening now, is everyone trying to figure out, you know, how to manage all the optics that are related to what they're doing is complex, you know. So anyway, I don't know if we've come to any conclusions. I think that we've had a great fun discussion though about NAB and about covering it. And I think that this idea of us building some kind of really intense review process, I think could be really interesting. So we'll have to, you know, think about what we can, you know, how we can make that work, you know. Yeah, so let's keep kicking that around. All right. For those of you watching, After Hours is still the same link. The dork who changed the date and didn't send you all emails didn't realize that it was going to affect all your iCals as well. So anyway, so that was me. So anyway, so I will so that I won't do that again. I'll make sure to send you out the stuff. Anyway, but it's all the same link. It's the same link it was yesterday. You can make your own thing. We talked about that at the beginning. And so thanks for the great questions and conversation from our producers. Great work. As always, I put up these subjects. I just have lots of trust in the producers that they will come up with enough questions that we will last for an hour. And thanks for the panelists for great input as well. So tomorrow we're going to talk about the business of live streaming. And right now we're going to jump into After Hours. Thanks.